Venice, 1764. The city shimmered like a dream, its canals flickering with lantern light, gondolas gliding as laughter spilled from grand palazzos. Carnival had reached its height, the season when noblemen and merchants alike disappeared behind masks, when secrets were whispered in shadows, and when the line between duty and desire blurred. Laila Delacroix stepped from the gondola with the grace her mother had drilled into her since childhood. The daughter of a wealthy diplomat from Saint-Domingue, Laila was accustomed to being observed. In the drawing rooms of Paris, she had endured curious stares. In the courts of London, she had suffered polite dismissals. But in Venice tonight, she would not be Laila the outsider. Tonight she would be whoever she chose to be. The mask promised as much. Her gown was a marvel of silk, the color of midnight, embroidered with silver threads that caught the torchlight. A mask of black velvet framed her eyes, its edges gilded in delicate scrollwork. She felt her pulse quicken as she stepped into the palazzo where the ball unfurled in a riot of color. Gold brocade, feathers, laughter, and music that soared like fire through the chandeliers. Everywhere she looked, revelers spun in dizzying waltzes, their masks gleaming, their whispers hidden beneath the music. Yet Laila moved with quiet confidence. For once, no one saw her as a curiosity or a question. They saw only a mysterious woman of poise and beauty. And in the anonymity of Carnival, that was power. She wandered through the throng, savoring the strangeness of freedom, until she felt it, a gaze lingering too long, too intently. Turning, she found him across the room. He wore a mask of ivory edged in gold, a stark contrast to his dark evening coat. Tall, broad-shouldered, his posture carried the ease of a man accustomed to command. But it was his stillness that struck her. While others danced and laughed, he simply watched her. Their eyes met, and the air shifted. A string of violins swelled as though marking the moment, as though the musicians themselves sensed the spark. Laila's breath caught, heat rising beneath her mask. She turned quickly, but even as she moved, she felt him following. At the edge of the ballroom, near the arched windows that opened to the canal, he reached her. His voice, low and smooth, carried the faintest lilt of Venetian nobility. You move as though the floor itself yields to you. Laila stiffened, torn between indignation and intrigue. And you watch as though you have nothing better to do, she replied, her tone sharp enough to test him. The man chuckled softly. On the contrary, I have waited all evening for a reason not to be bored, and now here you stand. His confidence was disarming, yet not mocking. Beneath the mask, his eyes glimmered with something Laila could not name, curiosity perhaps, or hunger. She should have left then, should have turned back to the crowd, but instead she found herself asking, "And if I am not what you expect?" He leaned closer, the music swelling around them. "Then you will be more than I dared to hope." The music swelled, violins and flutes weaving a spell that drew couples into the center of the ballroom. Laila stood still, though her pulse quickened with every glance she stole at the masked stranger who lingered near her. Around them, laughter rang in gowns of every color, spun like a living tapestry. Yet all she felt was his gaze, steady and unrelenting, as though he saw her through every mask, every pretense. Without asking, he extended his gloved hand. The gesture was bold, yet his voice, low and rich, carried a quiet invitation. "One dance, that is all I ask." Laila hesitated. Every instinct urged her to refuse, to turn back toward the safety of anonymity. But the thrill of Carnival pulsed through her veins. Tonight, no one knew her name. Tonight, she was not bound by her father's negotiations or society's expectations. Tonight, she could say yes. She placed her hand in his, and the air itself seemed to shift. He led her into the throng, where chandeliers blazed overhead and the floor vibrated with rhythm. Their steps fell into sync as though guided by fate. He moved with confidence, yet not arrogance. His lead was sure, protective, allowing her freedom to glide, to breathe, to shine. The crowd blurred, masks and feathers and jewels dissolving into a haze. All that remained was the press of his hand against hers and the fire in his eyes. "You dance as though the world has never told you no," he murmured, leaning closer as the music softened. Laila's lips curved into a small, defiant smile. "And you watch as though you've never been refused." His laugh was quiet, genuine, the sound warming her in a way no Venetian lantern could. "Touché, signorina." They spun, the hem of her gown brushing marble, until the music shifted to a slower, more languid melody. The air thickened with something unspoken, something dangerous. Laila felt her heart stutter as his hand lingered at her waist, his mask close enough that she could see the faint shadow of his jawline beneath it. "I do not know your name," she whispered, voice trembling despite her resolve. "And yet," he said, his tone dipping into something softer, almost reverent, "I feel as though I have waited my whole life to speak to you." Her breath caught. The words should have been empty. Carnival was built on such frivolities, but his eyes held no jest. They burned with truth, or at least with longing deep enough to seem real. For the first time in years, Laila felt not observed, not judged, but desired. Desired for more than her lineage or her fortune. Desired as a woman. The music ended, and applause broke out as couples bowed and curtsied. But he did not release her hand. Instead, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. "The garden, at midnight. Meet me there if your mask dares allow it." Before she could answer, he released her, disappearing into the swirl of feathers and velvet, leaving her standing breathless at the edge of the floor. Laila's heart raced as she pressed a hand to her chest. Midnight in the garden. One choice, and her night of disguise could unravel into something far greater, or far more perilous. Midnight tolled from a distant campanile, each bell drifting across the water like a promise. Laila slipped through an arched loggia and into the palazzo's walled garden, where lanterns glowed in glass cups and the air smelled of jasmine and damp stone. Beyond the hedge, a canal murmured. Somewhere, a gondolier sang a fragment of a lullaby to no one in particular. He stepped from the shadow of a cypress as if conjured by the bell. Ivory mask, dark coat, a posture too practiced to be anything but noble. He did not bow theatrically this time. Instead, he simply reached for her hand and held it as though it were a truth he had finally found. "You came," he said quietly. "For one dance you asked," she replied, unable to keep the smile from her voice. "Yet here we are, beyond the ballroom, where dances become confessions." They walked between beds of winter roses, the lantern light breaking across the gilt of his mask. Carnival encouraged frivolity, yet the space between them carried no jest. Laila felt the strangeness of safety. Anonymity wrapped around her like a cloak, and with it, a courage she had not known in Paris or London. "My father measures Venice in treaties and trade," she said. "He will have me measured likewise. Names, fortunes, doors that open if I carry the right key." "And what key do you carry?" he asked. "My face," she answered, and then, after a beat, "and my silence." He flinched, so slight she might have missed it. "Carnival promises we may be anyone for a night," he murmured, "but the morning demands we be ourselves again. I have learned that masks protect less than people think." A breeze stirred the jasmine. "Then why wear one?" she asked. "Because tonight I may stand beside you," he said, "without the room deciding for us what we are." They stopped by a stone well where colored confetti, coriandoli, had collected like fallen stars. He lifted a sliver of pale blue and pressed it into her palm. "A token," he said, "so that when dawn comes, you will know this was not a dream." Laila closed her fingers over it. The gesture was nothing, a scrap of paper, yet it felt like an oath. She looked up and found his gaze fixed not on her mask, but on her mouth. Heat rose to her cheeks. She glanced away and saw, past a trellis, the sweep of the ballroom through an open door. A woman in a feathered headdress stood there, half hidden, a fan poised like a blade, watching. Laila's breath caught. "We are not alone." He followed her glance. The fan snapped shut with a soft, decisive click, and the watcher drifted back into the crowd. A shadow remained where she had stood, as if scandal had a shape. Laila swallowed. "They will whisper," she said. "They already do," he answered. "About me. About expectations. A betrothal discussed in parlors and on paper, pretty words for a cage. Betrothal." The word chilled and steadied her at once. "Then we are both specimens for display," she said. "One for alliance, one for curiosity." He took a slow breath, as if bracing against a wave. "If I tell you my name," he said, "I burden you with it. And yet I want you to know me." "Names are for mourning," Laila said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Tell me something truer." He considered, then spoke as though laying down a weapon. "When I saw you cross the ballroom, I realized I had stood in rooms my whole life without ever entering them." Silence gathered, soft and luminous. She could have kissed him then, could have surrendered the night to its own logic, but footsteps brushed gravel somewhere beyond the hedge, voices rising, the particular music of gossip on the cusp of discovery. He stepped closer, urgency threading his calm. "Tomorrow my family hosts a smaller gathering. No masks, fewer places to hide. If you come as yourself." His gloved fingertips grazed the edge of her mask. "Let me stand in the light with you." Laila's heart pounded. "And if the light burns?" "Then let it," he said. "Better an honest fire than a lifetime of velvet darkness." The voices neared. A male laugh cut through the hedge. He drew back at once. "Go," he whispered, "not for fear, only for prudence." She caught his hand before he could vanish, pressed the blue confetto back to his palm, and replaced it with the ribbon from her mask. "Then we share the risk," she said, "one token for another." He closed his fingers over the ribbon as if it were a lifeline. Midday, the fondamenta by the little bridge with lion carvings, no disguises. Laila nodded. She slipped through the loggia and back into the blaze of chandeliers, her pulse a drum, her mask suddenly heavy with meaning. Behind her the garden narrowed to darkness. Before her, dawn waited somewhere beyond the canals, along with names and families and the kind of truth that breaks or binds. She did not know which it would be, but she knew she would go. The Lion Bridge lay quiet in the hush of late morning, its carvings weathered by centuries of salt air. Sunlight struck the canal, scattering diamonds across the water. Laila approached slowly, ribbonless mask tucked discreetly at her side. Every step was a battle between fear and anticipation. She had promised to come unmasked, and in doing so, promised to be seen. He was already there, leaning on the balustrade, his mask gone. Dark hair caught the light, and features that had once been hidden now sharpened into reality. A nobleman's bearing, unmistakable, though there was something weary in his eyes, as though the weight of expectation had ground them hollow. Laila's breath hitched. She had known he would be of status. His voice and manner had betrayed it. But now, stripped of anonymity, the gulf between them widened like the Grand Canal itself. He straightened at her approach, gaze fastening on her. For a moment, silence. Then he bowed slightly, the gesture carrying not mockery but reverence. "So the mysterious woman is no mystery. You are real, and you are braver than I." "Brave?" Laila's lips curved with irony. "Or reckless?" She lifted her chin. "Your name?" He hesitated as though speaking it would bind him. "Lorenzo di Rossi, eldest son of the Rossi family. And you, signorina?" "Laila Delacroix," she answered. The name fell heavy, for she knew it carried its own weight. The daughter of a foreign diplomat, of wealth, yes, but not of Venice, not of their ranks. She braced for the shift, the cooling in his eyes, the withdrawal. Instead, Lorenzo exhaled sharply, almost a laugh. "So, the world would say we stand on opposite shores." "The world would say worse than that," she replied. voice steady. They would call it scandal, folly, a story whispered with scorn. Let them whisper, he said, stepping closer, the lion carvings watching like sentinels. They whisper already of me, that I am too proud, too slow to marry, too quick to challenge. What is one more story, if it is ours? Laila's heart pounded. The boldness of his words ignited something dangerous, not merely attraction, but hope. And hope was far riskier than desire. She turned toward the water, watching gondolas glide beneath distant bridges. Last night was Carnival. Masks excused everything. But this is daylight. And still you came, Lorenzo said softly, which means you feel it too. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed across the bridge. Laila turned sharply. From the opposite end approached a woman draped in crimson silk, her mask lowered but not discarded. The feathered headdress left no doubt. She was the watcher from the garden. So it is true, the woman said, her tone edged with triumph. The Rossi heir and the diplomat's exotic daughter. How quickly Carnival strips away decency. Laila stiffened, but Lorenzo's hand found hers, steadying. Careful, Isabella, he said, his voice steel. Scandal cuts both ways. If you spread whispers, remember you stand in them too. The woman's smile was sharp. Perhaps, but my family would embrace whispers if it meant your alliance. Do you think they will allow you to throw it away for this distraction? She scoffed. Her eyes raked over Laila with pointed cruelty. You will be reminded of your place, both of you. She swept away, skirts trailing, leaving the echo of her words behind. Laila's throat tightened. She is right, she whispered. They will remind us until we cannot forget. Lorenzo turned her face toward his, defiant. Then let us remind them that we are not theirs to command. If we must fight, let it be for something worth bleeding. The wind lifted across the canal, scattering confetti left from last night's revelry. Laila's pulse raced as she stared at the man before her, unmasked, unflinching, and impossibly certain. Somewhere deep inside, she knew the next step would cost her everything she had been raised to protect. And yet, for the first time, she felt alive enough to risk it. A full day had passed since the meeting at the Lion Bridge. The hours between had stretched heavy with silence, each one filled with the echo of Isabella's threat. Laila had returned to her lodging, carrying both fear and defiance in her chest. She endured her father's sharp questions and worn the mask of composure as though nothing had happened. She had not seen Lorenzo since noon, yet the memory of his unmasked face, his vow, had burned brighter than the sun itself. Now, as dawn crept across Venice, painting the lagoon in hues of rose and gold, she stood on her balcony overlooking the Grand Canal. Carnival's glitter was gone, feathers and masks lay abandoned in alleyways, confetti floated like faded memories along the water. The revelry had ended, but the consequences had only begun. Laila clutched the ribbon he had kept. She told herself she would not see him again, that reason, duty, reputation demanded distance. Yet, when the gentle knock of an oar tapped against stone, her breath faltered. Below, a gondola waited, and in it, cloaked in black but unmasked, stood Lorenzo di Rossi. "You should not be here," she whispered as she descended the steps to the water's edge. The words trembled, betraying more longing than warning. "Should not," he echoed, his voice steady, "but am. Because the city already speaks of us. Better they speak the truth than a lie." Her throat tightened. "And the truth is scandal. My father will call me ruined. Your family will say you have disgraced them. Is love worth the ruin?" He reached for her hand, his gaze fierce in the soft light of dawn. "It is the only thing worth ruin. Laila, yesterday I told you I wanted something for myself, perhaps for the first time in my life. That something is you." Her eyes burned with tears she would not let fall. For all her years of silence, all her careful composure, she had never been seen so plainly, so fully. And in that sight, she found courage. Then let it be truth, she whispered, not whispered in gardens, not hidden behind masks. Ours, in the daylight, in defiance. He kissed her hand, slow and reverent. Then whatever storm comes, we will weather it together. They stepped into the gondola side by side, the water carrying them forward as the city awoke. Above them, gulls wheeled against a blushing sky, and bells rang for morning prayers. Laila looked back once, at the palazzos still heavy with shadows, at the carnival masks abandoned to gutters and canals. Then she turned forward, her hand twined in his. Venice shimmered behind them, a city of secrets. Ahead lay uncertainty, scandal, perhaps even exile. But for the first time, she did not tremble at the cost, for behind the mask she had found not escape, but truth and the courage to claim it. If this love story touched your heart, show some love back, like the video and subscribe for more. Tell me in the comments, should their love story continue or end with mystery?